Here's my problem with New Year's resolutions. They're always about adding. More exercise, more journaling, more meditation. For me, personally, wanting to do too many things in too little time is already a problem the whole rest of the year round, and it only gets worse in resolution season. On the way home from every camping trip I take with my spouse, I start talking about how we should go camping all the time. On the way home from every writing retreat we take together, I start talking about how we should be doing writing retreats all the time. The same pattern is true when we go out contra dancing or shape note singing or to queer burlesque and about 15 other activities on my favorites list. It is also true for quiet nights at home, which I also want a lot more of as well. Friends, the math just doesn't add up this way. It's not just going out and staying in that I want to do more of all of the time. I also want to be working more and making more music, and there's a long list of justice issues that seems to get longer every day that I wish I had more time for, and a long list of organizations I want to be volunteering with. This isn't just a problem in my days and weeks, it is a problem in my hours and my minutes. It is the list that hunts me down every morning. I open up my computer and I feel like there's a dozen different things and they all need to be done first. At my house now, we call this Mars rovering. When the rover robot first landed on Mars, it had a long list of sciencey things to do. But once the rover started working on one task, it would decide that another task was more important, and it would switch to that one. And it started switching back and forth between the tasks faster and faster until eventually it was paralyzed and motionless. It had reached a state where it was using 100% of its processing power deciding what to do first, because everything had to be done first, and it sat there doing nothing. Mars rover, I feel you. Robot technicians call this thrashing. The way out of thrashing, though, the way out of an over-scheduled calendar is to say no to some things. And so I invite you to begin 2026 with some irresolution and with some subtraction. Friends, let's learn how to say no. For every new commitment we want to add to our schedule or to-do list, we need to set something else aside. That is the pure math of it. There are only so many hours in the day, so a practice of saying no, of setting boundaries, is the only way we can get to more yet. Of course, the practice of setting boundaries is rife with power dynamics, not only of gender, but race and class and ableism. The things that we learned as children about how to be polite, or about avoiding conflict, or about how women or men are supposed to act, all of these things tug at our priorities. They mess with our ability to say no. They push and pull on our relationships. Different identities and backgrounds and cultures make it hard for folks to say no to different things and for different reasons. Saying no to a promotion or to a request to work overtime, saying no to a police officer or a family member, all might be difficult for different people in different ways. A good no, though, is how we clarify our values and move towards them. It's how we set the boundaries that grow our lives and allow our relationships to grow towards health as well. A good no is good for relationships, it is good for justice work, and it is a good spiritual practice. Let's talk about all three. I volunteer with the UU Musicians Association, as Charlene shared, and someone recently asked me in the organization to volunteer for a specific role. In fact, 3 separate people asked me to volunteer for this role. It was a role that needed to be filled, definitely, and none of us could think of anyone else who would be willing to take it on, which is not a good sign. I heard this familiar refrain in my head. Perhaps it's one you might be familiar with. It's a little voice that says, "I don't see how I could possibly say no." The word how is doing a lot of work here. And sometimes it's a sort of sleight of hand. Sometimes it means I'm not in a position to say no. Work obligations, financial insecurity, those power dynamics are just a few of the very many real reasons folks end up in a position where setting a boundary just doesn't feel like an option. That is real. But sometimes the how really is a question of how. Like, what words could I possibly use that would make it okay? For me, as someone who values relationships but can also be somewhat conflict avoidant, how can I possibly say no is a legit question. This book that I love, the one with the nerdy name, it says there are 3 parts to a good no. Yes, with an exclamation point, no with a period, and then yes with a question mark. Yes with an exclamation point, affirm what's important to you. Name the values you have in common with the asker. I love this organization, and I want to find ways to help that will fit with my gifts and my schedule. No with a period. Set your boundary. Say it clearly, with or without a why. I can't take on that role right now. Yes with a question mark. Make an offer that invites continued relationship. I'd love to check back in a few months. Or can we talk about ways I can support the person that does take this role on? We do this all the time without thinking about it. Thank you for the invite. I would love to see you, but I can't make it this weekend. Could we do next weekend instead? Yes is the word of community. No is the word of individuality. Yes is the word of connection. No is the word of protection. Yes, the key word of peace. No, the key word of justice. A good no isn't just about making weekend plans. It's necessary for following the true north of our values at every scale, for finding our way towards our priorities and our values. In many settings, a simple no thanks should be enough to set a boundary. This is particularly true if we're fighting against white supremacy or rising authoritarianism. We don't need to affirm anything or invite further relationship with people denying basic human rights. You don't owe affirmations or an offer of relationship to anybody. And I will say that I saw an interview a couple months ago after the New York's mayoral election, an interview with Mamdani before he met with Trump. Mamdani, who my family now refers to as my boyfriend, he was asked about the possibility of meeting with Trump, and his answer had some real yes, no, yes vibes. He said, if the president ever decides he wants to start working on the affordability crisis he campaigned on, I will be happy to talk with him. But know that if he comes for our people, to get through any of us, he will have to go through all of us. He's setting clear boundaries and standing up to bullies. But he is also affirming the shared needs of Trump's supporters for an affordable city, and he's keeping the door open to collaboration on shared interests. I imagine this is part of the reason that nearly 1 in 10 New Yorkers who voted for Trump a year ago voted for a Muslim socialist in November. A good no in politics, a good no that builds strong justice movements, is a no at the communal level, an affirmation of what we hold in common, a clear boundary that claims our power, and an invitation to work together in the places we agree. This formula is in some ways the basis of nonviolent resistance. Whenever we refuse cooperation with an authoritarian regime, whenever we take to the streets, we are proclaiming an affirmation of what we value, we are saying no to injustice, and if we do it well, we are keeping the door open for more and more of our neighbors to join in the movement. In the late 90s, there was a growing movement in Serbia to resist authoritarianism there. The movement, called Otpor, which means resistance, was rooted deeply in nonviolence. But they knew in order to overthrow the regime, they would need mass participation. So through 2 years of organizing escalating protests and demonstrations, Otpor activists also were sending care packages of food and cigarettes to soldiers in the army. They commiserated with individual police officers about poor pay and working conditions. Their goal was to make sure that when presented with a hard choice, the army and the police would side with the opposition rather than the regime. On October 5th in the year 2000, people from all over the country descended on Belgrade in long lines of cars and buses and trucks, filling the highways. The police had put up roadblocks, and officers had been given orders to shoot the protesters. But they disobeyed the orders. They saw that they were outnumbered, and they abandoned their posts. In fact, the image of a large yellow bulldozer driven by civilians plowing through regime barricades on the highway would become the defining symbol of what became known as the bulldozer revolution. In total, more than 500,000 people amassed in Belgrade. When tear gas failed to disperse the crowds, some members of the riot police fled, while others happily joined. Nonviolent resistance undermined and then overpowered the standing army of the nation. Mass civil disobedience overthrew the authoritarian regime. Otpor became the model for activists who went on to launch similar nonviolent revolutions, the Rose Revolution in Georgia 3 years later, and the Orange Revolution in Ukraine a year after that. They said to the police, yes, we affirm our shared love for our people and a commitment to decent working conditions for everyone. No to authoritarianism, and yes to the possibility of working together. We've talked about the personal and the communal no. Let us tie those together into the spiritual no. Yes, no, yes has become a clarifying practice for me. If I'm having a hard time saying no, it's often because I'm feeling torn between the ask and my relationship with the asker. Or it's because I'm thrashing between competing values in my own heart. But forcing myself to name the values tugging at me within the question of the yes, reflecting honestly on my limitations and my boundaries, and imagining possibilities for future connection. I can't think of 3 better questions for adjusting my internal compass to align my values with my commitments, to align my priorities with my to-do list. This hasn't cured my Mars rovering, but it has certainly helped me to respond to that list that hunts me down each morning, rather than to just constantly react to it. Unitarian-Universalism is a covenantal tradition, and that means that instead of handing down some rulebook from on high, the community we imagine and the way to get there are all decided together in conversation. I can't think of a more covenantal work than affirming what we hold in common, setting clear boundaries for our personal and communal health, and inviting continued connection as we grow and journey together. So in this new year, beloveds, as we imagine new possibilities, as we face that to-do list that hunts us down at the beginning of the day or the beginning of the year, may we go forth with a good no. Shout your yes, speak your no, and offer connection to the people that will help you flourish. May it be so, and may we make it so.